All right, so let's go over the solutions to these three problems. Let's start with the first one, is even. So to get started here, I'm going to go ahead and open up Sublime. I have an index.html file, and I'm going to add a script tag. And we'll just call this solution.js. So next up, I need to make the solution.js file. And I'm going to save that, solution.js, in the same place. And click Save. So again, we're starting with is even. So I'm going to declare the function is even. And it needs to take a single argument. Let's just call it num. And then we want to return true if even, return false otherwise. So there's a few ways of doing this. The first one is to do it as explicitly as possible. So we're going to say if num mod 2 is 0. Remember, that's how we tell if something is even. If the remainder of dividing 2 into that number is 0, if there is no remainder, that means that it's even. So if that's the case, we can return true. Else, return false. Just like that. And I'm going to move this up here just to make it clear what corresponds to what. Just like that. So we can do this, and I'm actually not going to call my function just yet. I'm going to open it up in the browser. I'm going to show you something slightly new. So if I open up my console, I actually have access to is even in my console here. So I type is even with no parentheses, and it tells me, yes, I know about is even, here's the code. And if I add the parentheses, I need to pass a number in, like 5, and I get false. And I can do it again with 4, or with 1, or with 99. And it works great. So there's two things there. Our is even works, so that's awesome. But more importantly, I want to show you that we can define functions and code in our files. And then when we open those files up in the browser, in this case our HTML file that's connected to our JavaScript file, I can then access those functions. So there is a small refactor that we can make here. I'm going to copy this code, comment it all out, and I'm going to shorten this up. So I'm just going to show you the solution first, and then we'll go over how it works. So this is substantially shorter. Return num mod 2 equals 0. So let's refresh the page, make sure that it works. Is even of 4 is true, is even of 3 is false. Still works the same way. So the way that it actually works, this line here, return num mod 2 triple equals 0, is going to evaluate this first. And that's a true or false statement. It's a Boolean statement. So num mod 2 triple equals 0 is either going to be true or false, and then we're just returning true or false. So rather than checking if it's true, return true, and if it's false, return false, we just return the value immediately. So that's a nice little shortcut there. So next up, we have factorial. So I'm going to go ahead and start by defining my function called factorial. Function, factorial, and we know it needs to take a number. So down here I'm going to write a note. So if I did factorial of 4, that should give me 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And I'm going to comment that out. So inside of our function, I'm going to write a few lines of pseudocode. The first thing that we know we want to do is define a result variable. And then the very last thing in the function is return the result variable. So it's the in-between that's important, and that's where we're going to calculate factorial and store value in result. So we have a few approaches in how we can calculate factorial. We could either start by setting result to be 1 at the very beginning, and then multiplying it by 2, and then multiplying it by 3, and then by 4, or we could go the other way around like we have here. And I'm going to start by doing it this way. So I'm going to define a result variable, var result equals 1. And then what we need to do is multiply that result by every number between 1 and that number. So 1 and 4 or 1 and 10, whatever is passed in as num. So to do that, we'll want to use a loop. We could use either a for loop or a while loop. I'm going to use a for loop here because it's a little bit shorter. So for var, and let's just call it I. And we could start I as 1, so I'll do that first. And we're going to keep multiplying while I is less than or equal to num. And then we're going to add 1 to I every time. And then all that we want to do is multiply result by I. So if we step through this, if we did it for 4, factorial of 4, result starts as 1 right here. Then we're creating I, starts as 1, and we multiply result by I. So that's just 1 times 1, which you'll notice is unnecessary. So we might want to just start this at 2. So the first time through, we multiply I times result, so we get 1 times 2. Next time through, I is now 3 because we added 1. So that is still less than the number, which is 4. So we multiply again. Result equals the current value of result, which is this, times 3. So then we have 6. And then the next time through, I now is 4. So 4 is less than or equal to 4. That is true. So we're going to multiply one last time by 4, and then add 1 to I in our for loop, and now we're done. Because now we're at 5. 5 is not less than or equal to 4. So that's all we should need to do there. There's one small change we could make. We don't need to say result equals result times I. We can shorten this by using star equals, which is just a shortcut for the exact same thing that we just had. And then the very last thing we need to do is return result. So save, let's open it up in the browser, refresh, and we should have access to our factorial function. Let's try factorial of 3, and we get 6. How about factorial of 4? Or 10, which is 362,000, or 3,628,800, which is what we got over here as the solution to factorial of 10. And then let's try it out, factorial of 0. And we get 1. So it works perfectly. So that's all we need to do for factorial. As I mentioned, you could do this in the other direction, where we start with result equal to number and we work backwards. And that would be a very simple modification. Basically, we would change this to be num, and then we would start here at 1 below num, while I is greater than or equal to 1, I minus minus. So we're starting, result is 4, and then we're going to multiply by 1 less than the result, which is 3, and then subtract 1. So multiply by 2, and then multiply by 1, and then we're done. So that one definitely works as well. The only issue that we could run into, if we refresh, let's try this, factorial of 3, it gives us 6, 5 gives us 120, and 0 gives us 0. So there is a problem there, because when we start it this way, result is equal to num. If we pass in 0, we're starting result as 0. And then we're done. We're not multiplying 0 by anything, and even if we did, it would still be 0. So the solution to that is we could have a simple if statement in here. That could be something like if num equals 0, return 1. And remember, if we have a return statement, that short circuits everything. So now we should be good to go. However, I prefer the first solution because it's shorter and we don't have to have that special case. All that we need to do is set result equal to 1 at the beginning, and that takes care of everything for us. All right, so let's tackle the last one, which is kebab to snake. So remember, this is supposed to take a single string and replace all the dashes with underscores. So it takes kebab case, turns it into snake case. So I'm going to go define that function first, and I'll just leave it empty to start. So function, let's make some space here. function kebab to snake takes in a single string. We'll just call it str, and then we'll put our logic in there. But first, I'm going to fill out some pseudocode again. What we'll want to do is replace all dashes with underscores, and then lastly, return str. So the crux of this problem is that we don't know how to actually do that. How do we replace all of one character in a string? And again, that was deliberate. I wanted you to have to try and look this up, to have to find this out online. It is a really, really important skill. So the first thing that I would do is figure out how I want to word my search on Google. So that sounds like something that would be pretty obvious, but it really is going to have a big impact on the types of results that we get. And the rule that I live by is that you want to make your search as general as possible. So we don't want to include things about dashes and underscores or snake case and kebab case. So instead, we might want to make a search trying to find out how we replace any character in a string, whether it's a dash or an underscore or a $sign. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to search for JavaScript replace character string. And let's see what we get. Get a few results here. I like to avoid W3 schools, so let's try these two. How do I replace a character at a particular index? So that's not quite what we're looking for. This one looks good though. Replace all commas in a string. So because we didn't include the dash or the underscore or the camel or kebab, we got this result, which will work just fine. This one is to replace all commas. We'll just need to change one tiny character in the solution. Rather than replacing commas, we want to replace dashes. So the way Stack Overflow works, if you've never seen it, up top is the asker's question. So this is not where we want to read our solution. This is the asking of a question. And answers are in reply, so under this answers section. And here we go, here's an answer. This person says you can use a regular expression with the G flag. And the great thing is, you don't have to know what that is. We will talk more about regular expressions, so let's go ahead and copy this over. So the first thing we want to do is adapt this code to fit our particular situation. So we don't need this first variable declaration because we actually have our string coming in as str. What I will need to do is do the replace on str in the first place. And then we'll want to change what we're replacing and what we are replacing it with. So we want to replace dashes. And all that I'll say about this syntax here is that this is called a regular expression, and whatever we put inside of these slashes is the pattern that it will look to replace. So if I put something like double dashes, it would look for 2 dashes in a row. So that's it. Regular expressions are much more complicated, where I can define very long and advanced patterns, and then I can replace them with something over here. So then we need to update what we're replacing the dash with, which is just an underscore. So I'm going to save this to a variable called new string, or new str, is the result of running the string.replace. The reason I did that is that .replace doesn't actually replace anything in the str in the initial string itself. It just returns a new copy with the replace data. So I want to capture that new copy that's returned in the new string variable, and then just return new str. So let's try this out in the browser. I'm going to refresh my problem set page and try kebab to snake of hello-world. And we get hello_world. Let's try it again with hello world again. And you can see it replaces all dashes. So that's it there. So again, the focus in this exercise was really on Googling and trying to find information